Good evening, everybody. My name's Katiana Ballantyne, and I'm the City Councilor for Ward 7. I'm really excited you're here. Thank you all for coming. There is a sign-in sheet that's getting passed around to the tables, so if everybody would sign in, that would be great. The reason why, you will get information on follow-up on this or on the project itself over at the old school, the Powderhouse School. So this evening, the designers for the project are here. So this property is owned by the city. It's a park. And as part of the proposal, the architect that is working on and the developer that's working on the former school is part of their RFP proposal was to redesign a park. And so I am here to listen, just like you all. If you need to speak to me afterwards or have any questions, I'm happy to stay and chat with you as long as you want. And I will pass this over to Louisa.
Thank you. On behalf of the mayor and Councilor Ballantyne, I want to welcome you. Thank you for coming tonight. We want to give you an update. Before I do that, I'm going to introduce the other city staff that's here today. My name is Louisa Oliveira, and I'm a senior planner for landscape design in the Parks and Open Space Department. We also have Sue Thomas, who's a senior planner in economic development, and Malik Drayden, who's an arborist in the urban forestry. There he is. And then we have the design team. Oh. Everyone, please look at Malik. And then we also have Eden Dutcher-Martin from Groundview, who's the landscape architecture firm, and the developer and architect Sebastian Mariscal from Marka. So we're just going to kind of go through some of the initial stage setting stuff. For today, we want to talk about giving you a quick update on the building. It's been a while. You are probably going by it every day and seeing that there's things happening on it. And then really the crux of this meeting is to focus on giving you an update on the park and that final design and the construction schedule, because we're hoping to break ground this summer and start working on it. This is an interesting park in that it's a public park. It belongs to the city, but is being constructed by the developer. And so I don't know how many of you are aware of this publicly owned private space or all these different ways that cities are generating open space by partnering with developers. This is that, but in a non-conventional way, because it's not a privately owned public space. It's a publicly owned public space that was constructed by the developer. And then once we go through the park information, I do want to talk about a friends group and establishing a friends group for the park and what form that can take. And it's a way for you to be involved and to kind of give back and also to use the park in the way that your community would like to. So there have been a number of community meetings, and really these community meetings were to try to get information from you about how you use the park, understanding the neighborhood health, understanding the use, the safety, security questions, understanding access, and then making sure that what we came up with in the end was a design that captured the energy of this process and that everyone felt that they were heard in that process. And finally, just to let you know where you can hear about the more updates, there is a link right now on the city's website. This project is listed under Parks and Open Space, and then that links to the Marka site, which has all of the information. I think it's been recently updated. So you can keep tabs there. You can also contact us if you have any questions, and then these meetings are advertised. Usually we send an email to the communication office, and it goes to the social media, to the newspaper, and a number of different other outlets. I think Councilor Ballantyne also sent it out in her newsletter, and you may have received a note from Marka on their mailing list. So here are the community meetings. There have been 5 to date. This is the 6th one, this update meeting. So there has been, has anybody been to all of them? Whoa, wow. Winner. Wow. This table wins. Great. So it's great that people are involved and that they're keeping on track, because it's a way for us to know that we're building something that's going to be used, and also that people are then going to care for it in a place where open space is so important. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sebastian, who's going to give you an update on the meeting. Is this too bright? Is there a way to shut a light off here? Or? Better? Oh, yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. After all the community meetings we had, I missed them. And so I'm glad that we're meeting again. I think the process of the community meetings inform us how to design the project, not only the park, but also the building. The RFP, I think it was a great vision that invite to public space and make something very inclusive. So that's what we're working hard on it. And on the park, we're working with Grandview, which Eden is here with us today. And I want to give you just a quick overview of the project. This is the render of the project, the way it's going to be completed. Let's see the next image. And then, well, as you know, the building is on the right under in the screen on top's administration building. And then this green square, that's a park. So let's see the next one. So one of the main goals of the project, it was a public space. So we tried to figure out a way to not only have this great park to be the public space, but how can we blur or even erase the property line between public and private and invite the public space permeate into the building and vice versa. So right here, more or less, is the property line, and here we're going to have a covered plaza and then the courtyard. So we have more than 40% of the square footage of the lot to be public space, and I think it'll be a good reference on how private development can integrate public space, which every city will appreciate. Let's see the next image. So we're well under construction, very exciting. The building has been changing a lot. As you remember the building, it was a very enclosed, not very welcoming building. And what we did as a first thing is to remove all the CMU wall, the concrete block wall, and open it. We are removing some of the elements that we are trying to reuse also. One of the things that I like a lot of keeping the building, in addition to all the sustainability side of it, is that in a way we weave the past and the present. And I like the idea of seeing an old building and then seeing elements of the building reused in the park, where we're going to have some spandrel beams, concrete beams that are going to be benches and things like that, that I think is going to be more welcoming than something brand new. Next. Here you can see the construction progress from Broadway. Next. And then here is a little bit of the before and after. So on the left, of course, is the before, building completely solid with no interaction to the outside. And on this side is a very open, where we're standing taking the picture, of course, is a park. And you can see through the public plaza that is going to be covered, and then the courtyard. Next. One thing that changed dramatically the project is when we build this roof on top of the parking space, of the parking area. So basically before, the building was 3 stories on the courtyard, and the courtyard feel very small. There was not much light, sun getting into the building. It really feel dwarfed the courtyard. When we raise the courtyard, now we have a 2-story building, and the courtyard just feels huge. So it's more of a residential size, and then also it's very open, a lot of glass, and then we're gonna be working on some murals with artists. Next. Here you can see again with the raised courtyard. Next. And then here, and just in the courtyard, I want to add that we're going to have 24 inches of soil where we're going to have vegetation. So the idea is to kind of erase the notion that we're not on the ground level, that there is a parking underneath, that really you're in a garden. So the construction progress, we have the demo and abatement is pretty much done. We have a couple walls that we need to demo and abate. Underground, 94% completed, structural steel 90%, the concrete shear walls also 90%. Together, I mean, the top four were huge line items on the project or in the construction. Structural steel and concrete shear walls, it was a structural retrofit, and right now we're at 95% done or so. So we're starting to build new stuff. So roofing 80%, metal framing 65%, and plumbing 45%. So we hope that now, after the winter is completed, the progress is going to be even greater. I want to add also that after this meeting, we're going to update again the website with all the conclusions of this meeting. I'm going to resend the email with all these conclusions for anybody that didn't receive the email, so making sure that everybody is in the list. If somebody knows that is not in the list after I send this update, please send me an email, and I'll make sure to add him. And then from here, I want to introduce to Eden to present the landscape project. We're very proud to have Broadview as the landscape architects. I think they're very sensitive of the project that we're doing together, and it's great to be working with them. So here's Eden.
Thank you. So I'm Eden, and I did get to see many of you at our last meeting. And thanks to Sebastian, he's been a great collaborator on this project. And so I'm excited to show you basically the final design, because telling you about the park process, that it's going out to bid. So they're going to get numbers back from the contractor to implement. And we'll talk a little bit more about schedule at the end of the presentation. So if you can hold your questions until I get through the material, then we can have a discussion afterwards. So to orient you to the site, here's Holland and Broadway, and we're looking north. And then, so we are flipping the site. So here's Broadway, here's the school building, the TAB building, and our park site. And here are a couple views of the site before the staging. This one I think is a really critical view. We're standing on the Broadway sidewalk, looking up into the park site, and then this is the walk that took you through past the TAB building and onto Holland Street. So we're going to talk a little bit about this grade change here, because it's kind of critical to the overall park design. So if you can see, it's about 3 feet higher than this sidewalk, and so that's really important for accessibility reasons in our design. And then here we are in the middle. We're up top that 3 feet, and we're looking back towards the big wall. And down here, we're actually standing on the wall, looking back towards the park site over the Tufts Court. So this is a plan drawing. We're going to look and plan from now on through the presentation. So here's Broadway. Here's the building. This is very faint. We're going to get a better image soon. And this is our park property here. So this is the city's park property, and over here is the Tufts Court. There were 12 trees on the site before staging, and 6 of those 12 trees have been removed for accessibility during construction and ultimately for the park accessibility. So this is a diagram that just overlays the number of trees that we are keeping. We're keeping 6 of the beautiful shade trees along the perimeter of the park, and we are adding in 16 trees. And this is a diagram to show you how we're adding those in. So we're going to have a net gain of 10 trees within the park property. So this is the overall illustrative plan, and So this overall, right here, is our park property, and it connects over to the second level of the building project that Sebastian was explaining. So there's a clear connection of this open space. So I'm going to take you on a tour around the park to show you all the different park programs and features. And to begin, because it is the backbone of the entire park, is the accessibility throughout the park. And as I was talking about, this is the Broadway sidewalk, and this is the main connection through the park up to the sidewalk to Holland. And this is all level, it's all flat. So it takes you between these two existing beautiful trees here and connects under a 5% walk all the way along here and connects to this open space on the building. There are secondary paths all the way around and throughout the park that are, again, they're under 5%, so they're completely accessible. Now, there are two shortcuts on either side of the park, here and here, on the, let me see if I can get my directions right. So that's on the west side. On the west side, you can step down a few steps to get into the park at this main level. And on the east side, you can step up steps to get to the main level. So does that sort of tell you about, basically we're sloping downhill about 6 feet from here to here. So there is no curb cut at the entrance. That is a great question. The existing curb cut is over here that takes you across from Packard. My light's like not working amazingly. Yes, and we do have a discussion point on that. If Louisa, did you want to address that now or at the end? To the end. Okay. Yes. Great question. So this is the Tufts Court, which existed before and has recently been renovated, and it looks really beautiful. This is a nighttime shot, so you're not quite seeing how great it looks, but they did a great job. It is on Tufts property, but it will remain open for Somerville residents all the time. There is a large multi-use lawn at the center of the project, and that is completely multi-use. The seating, there will be traditional park seating, by benches with backs and cafe seating, but as Sebastian mentioned, we're going to have something pretty special where we have these salvaged spandrel architectural units from the building that we're going to put on concrete pedestals to have for seating throughout the park. And there's this other special moment here, which is the amphitheater, that it's going to be oriented towards the building that will, again, be made out of these units. You can see them. They're out on the site right now. If you go to the basketball court, you can check them out. They're pretty cool. And Sebastian, I don't know if you wanted to mention a little bit about the programming centered around the amphitheater. This is exterior. This is going to be in the park and open all the time, but it will be oriented to the building that might have special programming.
So basically, this is another example of a crossing between the public and the private. So can I have the laser? Thanks. So here is the building, and this is a space that we call the hub, which basically is a space that people can use on a daily basis, on an hour basis. Our commercial tenant is going to coordinate the use of that space. But here, there is two huge glass garage doors that open completely. So it opened completely here for the hub on this side, but also for the amphitheater. So when there is an event that is organized, let's say Shakespeare in the Park or a concert or something, it can happen here. People can be inside, but also outside. But when nobody is programming the hub, the space, somebody from the community just use the amphitheater. It's just going to be open, and it's going to be just part of the park.
So we have this big wall on the west side of the property, and Marka is talking with the city about potential for activating the wall through a mural program. So that's an ongoing discussion, and there's also opportunity to use light, using special filters to create patterning on the wall throughout the year. We have two areas that we're calling program pods, and those are opportunities for elements that could be a ping pong table, outdoor exercise equipment, or a splash pad, and that is to be determined. It could happen immediately with this initial program or in a future phase. It's budget contingent, so depending on how the bids come back in the next month, we'll have more information on what will be included in this first phase. The planting. The planting is a huge part of this park design, and we wanted to talk a little bit about the planting strategy. We want this planting, because it's such a big part of it, to be lush, naturalistic, but yet maintainable, because the Department of Public Works is going to be in charge of making sure that it looks great for years and years to come. So we want to have a clear plan of how to make that happen. We also want the interest to be something that our census has interest throughout the year, all 4 seasons. Attract biodiversity, include plants that provide a variety of resources that would attract many different types of wildlife. Plants with structure, things that are really hardy, that we can help to protect against the entire integrity of the planting design at key corners, like around the main path intersections, and using the plant beds as stormwater catchment, putting them to work. We are sheet flowing all of the stormwater to plant beds so that plants can be passively irrigated and drink up as much water as they can before any excess in an extreme event would then go into the storm sewer. So for trees, we are lucky to have these beautiful shade trees around the perimeter. So we want to bring that shade tree and balance into the center of the park. So we're looking at tulip trees for the large shade trees and looking at a bosque of ginkgo trees here at the edge of the multi-use lawn. For the plant beds, talking a little bit about what is our strategy for making sure that they're maintainable. And so we're looking at a pattern of plant beds that would have distinct plants in them. This is I'm going to take you through the palette a little bit. This is a bayberry, which is a broadleaf evergreen. And looking at a needle evergreen, arborvitae, and looking at a variety that only gets about 3 feet tall, and that's sort of important for all of the plant beds, is that we're looking at plants that are between 1.5 to 3 feet tall so that you can maintain visibility at all levels of the park all the time throughout the year. This one, we're looking at a yellow twig dogwood that is an excellent choice for the lowest points in our planting design to drink up all that rainwater, and it has a beautiful seasonal interest in the winter. And speaking of a real great plant in the winter is this winter berry. It has these beautiful berries that are attractive to songbirds and just has great interest throughout the winter. This is Russian sage, which is a choice that we have for perennial that gets really lush and full through the summer and the winter or to the late fall. And basically, this is what we were talking about. These are the kind of the perennial beds that we're placing inside that will be protected by those more hardy plants that we were just talking about, like the dogwood and the winterberry. This is Blue Star, and it is it's another perennial, but it's almost more like a shrub, and it has this beautiful yellow chartreuse color in the fall, and it has kind of like, even though it's very shrubby, it has kind of an airy quality because the needles are so thin. And this is my personal favorite. This is the yucca. Again, it's a perennial, but it acts almost like a shrub, and it has this year-long evergreen, really thick leaves. And then in the summer, it has these 4-foot-tall flower plumes. So it can be like a real workhorse throughout the whole year, but then have something very special, something showy in the summer. So we do have bike parking, and we're locating it up on Broadway on the sidewalk. And then there's going to be a bike repair station located in sort of the entry plaza area. And the park will have all the other standard park furnishings. It's going to have signage and trash and recycling, lighting. We've been working a lot on lighting to make sure that the lighting is at the right safe levels throughout the park, and it will have a drinking fountain. So this is a view if we're standing back on the sidewalk. If we're coming from the Tabs building, looking into the park, and then this is a view as we're basically brought up to level, and then showing the perennial beds framing the view. I'm going to bring Sebastian and Louisa back up for discussion, and just as a brief, what's next is that the groundbreaking is looking like July of this summer.
The last thing I just want to mention is that often in our parks, residents decide that they want to form a friends group. So I wanted to have a little bit of an introduction to what that is. Friends groups usually take on whatever form they want. We have one at Chuck E. Harris. They hold a number of different events, like a Easter egg hunt. We have another one at Symphony Park. Sometimes people will get together and take care of the planting beds. So if anybody is interested in doing that, I will put together a sign-up list, and then once the park is done, we can get together and I can tell you where the city is involved and not involved in what a friends group would be like, and the types of things that you may want to consider. So I just wanted to put that out there in case people are excited to either take care of a park or program the park, that there are opportunities for that. So I'd like to open it up now for any questions that you have either on the building or the park. And Ron, would you like me to address your bike question? Psychic friends. So the bike question was about whether or not we would be building a curb cut on the side. And I don't know if you remember in the beginning discussions of the park, there was very much a lot of push towards making the bike path a bike path that goes through the park. And then the city really, as a policy, does not like to have a bicycle only or a fast moving bike path bisecting a park for obvious reasons. Right. So in fact, there isn't going to be a curb cut just for that reason, because if there were a curb cut, now you have to stop and kind of either ride or walk around. But if there was not, people would be riding through and not stopping. So it's a way to kind of get people to slow down because there may be other pedestrians walking. So
the reason I thought it might be a good idea is because don't have a curb cut, what you're going to have instead is conflict between pedestrians and bicycles on the sidewalk between the curb cut and that entrance.
So I think there's a curb cut at the entrance. So the idea is that you would ride there and then ideally get off your bike and walk through the park. But if not, you're at least having to stop and maneuver to go between the park. So it was a conscious decision to not have bicycles going faster. Any other questions?
About the curb cuts, will it be,
There were issues like
trying to formulate my question. Will it be coordinated in some way with the traffic light? That's one question. The pedestrian crossing on Broadway.
So I don't understand your question. There's a pedestrian.
Will the curb cut be at the same place? For instance, a lot of people cross and you have strollers or walkers or some need for access. And I want to know if that traffic light and the curb cut will work together.
So the curb cut is the existing curb cut. So that traffic pattern isn't changing. There are opportunities to talk about that, but they're kind of outside of the scope of this park project. In other words, we're not redoing the intersections, but it sounds like there may be you're trying to say there's something going on at that intersection and you want to make us aware of that. Is that correct?
There had been a discussion as part of this project about whether the crosswalk should change to the other side, whether, now that this park was going in, whether that should be part of the park. There were some issues with where the buses are and cars having to go around the buses. And so I know that the last I had heard, there were still some discussions about it. I don't know where it landed, but
So I did reach out to the engineering office and had a conversation with them about this curb cut and this bike thing. And one of the engineers did say that they will be, I think maybe Powderhouse is in line for being redone or reconfigured. So they're aware of that. I'm sorry. They are aware of this whole, they agreed that we shouldn't put in it was a specific question about the curb cut for bicycles. This is what I asked the engineering office.
Can you show where the curb cut's going to be? Where it's going to be?
Yeah.
Where the crosswalk is now, right?
I think it is exactly where it is now.
Which is on the right side of Packard as you're going toward the school?
no.
It should be. It should be on the right side. That's the one
Counselor
thing you probably should
Valentine?
change.
The primary walkway now goes to the curb cut. The trouble is, when the walkway goes, it's a four-way cross. But a lot of people use the one which you might call northwest, the one closer to Teal Square. There's no lines or crosswalk noted there, but the reality is a lot of people do cross there, especially with the way that path is going to be set up. Now, one pole on Packard and Broadway has a push button on that northwestern side. The other side does not have a push button, and it needs a push button, and it needs a crosswalk put in there because you can't ignore it. That's the way people are going to cross.
And there needs to be a curb cut at that location too.
Yeah, you really do.
Not where the bike path, not the place where I suggested, but at the place where he's suggesting.
If I could just add my comments, and maybe Sue, this is something, this is outside the park design. Thank you.
So this is outside the park design, as Louisa said. But Sue, I think that, and Sebastian, there's just a little confusion on where that crosswalk is to be. So that's something to be followed up on, because I know from one of the neighbors who lives across from the park, who couldn't be here tonight, he's been asking me, and has his wife, for a year to try to get the crosswalk to move, because there was some understanding that there was going to be a crosswalk there. So it's a follow-up, and again, it's outside this park discussion, but Sue and Sebastian, we just need to talk about that, okay?
Issue of a crosswalk though, and the curb cut, a city issue. They don't own the property at the corner of that sidewalk's a city sidewalk. So the question of whether a curb cut was put in there is a city issue, not the development. They might have a recommendation, but it's really a city issue.
Yes, so the sidewalk is owned by the city. I just want to revisit, because this was a hefty discussion during the whole discussion about this park. So I just want to be clear that we understand where we left off on that and who was handling the park. So I'm not clear who was handling that crosswalk in terms of cost or in design, or who was going to do that. We'll follow up.
And I can add, echoing what Luisa was saying, is that conversation was in place several times. But I think the conclusion that it was very strong, it was that the location that is right now, it was the proper location, because if we move it, then it'll be a straight shot to go with the bicycles at high speed, just non-stop. So
Because you were saying they would have to turn, so it wouldn't be a straight shot, but if they went straight, they'd be getting stairway.
So to your point, this is
Stairway.
something that our traffic engineers and our engineering department needs to start working on and take hold of.
Because I think there's a certain amount of what's the reality. You can try and play around with it any way you want. There's a certain amount of reality. And
Yes.
that northwestern crossing is particularly used. I don't know what you're going to do about bicycles and carriages, but I think it needs to be recognized as a real crossing.
Right, because anything I say about bicycles is also true for wheelchairs, strollers, shopping carts. Once you say you're not going to have it there, you should still have it at the corner for all those other users.
Any other questions?
Actually, hopefully a quick question for Sebastian.
Should I give you the?
I'll be loud.
You should use it actually just for accessibility. There might be people in the room.
So it's
that-
being videoed. So maybe
Okay.
It's
it'll be
also
on.
being video, but also for accessibility.
Who should be our contact at Marka? Is Steven still the contact, or is there somebody else now?
So we have a new staff member at the office and started today actually. But in the meantime, I'm going to be the contact.
And as Sebastian said, we'll get this slide presentation up online so that you can share it with neighbors and let people know.
Two questions, one of which is, what's this thinking on kind of barriers in between various parts of the park plaza, especially if there's a splash pad in the street? Because a few of the other city parks that have had splash pads have the challenge where kids playing in them kind of have that risk of you need to keep a really close eye on them to keep them from dashing into the traffic. It looks like you have kind of some offset here, and I see a picture of a fence there, but it wasn't clear what the thinking of is in terms of kind of fencing or barriers to keep kids from making a dash for it.
That's a great question, and doing my loud voice. So this is where the splash pad or cooling area would be if it goes in. And so it is basically tucked in off of the secondary path. And so to get to the main Broadway, you would have to go up and around, up the set of stairs, or through the plant bed, or through the plaza area. So it's tucked in pretty well from the Broadway sidewalk. Yes, and then there's basically this right here. You probably can remember, I don't have a photo of it. There's the existing utility cabinets there that are actually fenced. So it is tucked away. Did you have another question? Yes.
Is there any thinking of having any sort of public restrooms in the space? I know that's been a hot topic for a bunch of the parks in Somerville recently.
So the answer to that question is no, and that's partially for two real reasons. One is budgetary, so putting in something like a public restroom, it's either going to be a porta potty, which you're paying for someone to maintain, or a real structure that can be quite expensive, and so it takes away from some of the park elements. So we're kind of, everything is a trade-off, and while I know that people more and more would like to have public restrooms in parks, until we as a city decide we're going to put a public restroom in every single park, it's something that we have to decide as a trade-off. Now, there have been people who have been expressing that they want porta potties in the parks. Other people are vehemently against it. So in this project, that is not a consideration.
So also on that, pods, they were activity pods or something? You were, right, that's right, okay. Activity pods. So I was just wondering if there's going to be any opportunity for public comment or discussion about what kinds of things might go in there? Because you mentioned, do we have the money? But I was just wondering if the options are already a done deal, or if you're going to have discussions.
So that's a great question. There were three things that Eden mentioned, a water spray, and when I say that, we have some very robust water features. That's not what we're talking about here. This would be a single spray head. Or exercise equipment, which I think was expressed in some of the other meetings as well. And then the other one is a ping pong table. And we're happy to hear comments on preferences. Again, these are all budget dependent. And the idea is that when Eden says a pod, it's really a space that is left for that or for other programming. If nothing goes in there, then certainly, it could become something else. But I think for us, again, it's going to depend on how much does it cost. But I guess it would be just a good idea to get a temperature of what people are really interested in? Is there one of those three things that you would like to see more than another? How about we do a quick vote? So the water pad. Okay. How about, so I think we got like two or three people. Why don't you raise your hands high? Feel strong on your waterness so that we kind of know. Did you count, Eden? Okay, thanks. And then the exercise equipment? 6? Oh, this is going to be fun. This decision will be made for us on the budget. And what about the ping pong table?
I think there had been another consideration, which was the idea of sort of a blank space or something for people to do whatever.
So that's what it is. That's what it will be designed as. And there's really a little. Sometimes we have these conversations where people are, I very much want a passive space and I want nothing there, and that's also great, but we also need to have something that draws you, like why you would get off the sofa with your child to go to it. So as it is now, there will be spatial pods that have nothing in them. Once we figure out what the bids are, then potentially it sounds like we could either put in a piece of exercise equipment or what was the other one that people like? The splash pad. And those are very different prices. The splash pad comes with a lot of infrastructure. It's much more expensive than putting in some exercise equipment.
I'd suggest having another discussion about what to do with that before making some decision, because it's a long time since we talked about what it was going to look like. And now that some of us are seeing the potential, I think people may have new ideas or different ideas, so I hope we put a lot of effort into getting community input into that. And I also have a question. Right now, the basketball court is really wonderful, and it has fencing on 3 sides. And I'm curious about what's going to happen to that 4th side. And then this is irrelevant really, but I'm curious about the parking lot that's right underneath this beautiful spot.
The basketball court is fenced on 2 sides, and then it has the wall on this side, and then it will remain open on this side, which, as far as like ball conflicts, I think that you won't see many because the direction of play is across the wall and to the fence. But we want to be able to keep that open so that it feels like part of the park. And the parking?
You asked a question about the parking lot.
Well, it belongs to Tufts, but it's
On the other side.
Yeah, on the other side. It's
It will
kind of an
continue to
eyesore. I'm just curious if anyone knows if there's anything that's going to change there.
Did you have a third? Was there a third? No, you just wanted.
Any thoughts on a park name or how we would eventually get to that?
So there are a couple of ways that parks get named in the city. Usually they're named after a veteran from Somerville who, lately we've been having more discussions about, well, if it's named after a veteran, that usually means it's named after a man. It usually often means it's named after a white man. So there's a lot of kind of conversation. I think that I don't know what name, if there is a name thought up for this park. I'm hoping Councilor Ballantyne will be involved in that conversation. But at this moment, I've not heard it's going to be this or that.
What is the process by which it would get named?
So normally what happens is that the Veterans Commission picks a veteran and gives us a name. That is the normal how we do it. But I think that is not a written in stone policy, and I think we are kind of exploring that.
We're slightly open to it. So there is a running list of names that, across the city that really needs to be named. But specifically for this, if you have comments, send them to Councilor Ballantyne and she'll filter that through to us, and then we can kind of go through an internal process. But on that note, there is a memorial on the mural by the court, and we actually don't know the story behind that. There's there's like a 17-year-old kid's name on there. We don't know the story. So if residents, if you guys can help us with that story, if there's any meaning towards that, that would be, an example. But just to actually, for us, just internally, if we can get an idea of what that story is about, that would be great. If not, that's fine. We'll look it up and figure it out. But just since you guys are here, it would be great. I can see Jim's hand going up.
I don't know.
Question,
Do you have the
okay.
name yet?
What's that?
Do you have the name on the wall?
Eddie Martin.
Eddie Martin.
Oh, you must know him. The name's familiar. I was there before the Powderhouse when it was short.
I know, that's why I looked at it. So I'm going to deem you to look that up and tell us what that is. Yes.
I have just a question. The programmable space, what is the size of the programmable space? What is the size of the programmable space?
So I think you mean the pods, that we would call them as pods.
Okay, the pod.
I would say it's about 20 feet across, so probably
Okay, I'm looking at the other area. The amphitheater hall.
Here.
Yes.
So this steps down, and so it's seating, so this is the high side, and then it steps down 3 seats, and this is the low side, which basically you're oriented towards the stage. And maybe Sebastian, how big do you?
So the full stage is about 40 feet wide. And then from there, we have a walkway of about 5 feet, and then the 3 steps up.
And how about the flat space in the middle there?
Right here?
No, to the right of that. To you, going towards Teal Square, yes, there.
This
The lawn.
So
How-
to kind of give you a sense, this is about 20, this path width is about 20 feet wide, this path is about 10 feet wide, so what do you think? About
40?
60 feet?
On that first slide that you said was at a raised level, I forget what you called it, I'm wondering how much of any of that is sheltered by rain, if there's any sitting areas that are sheltered by rain, sheltered from rain, rather.
So there's no proper shelter within the park. We have seating strategically underneath the trees, which gives you some, right? And then there is undercover, as we talked about, there's this connection through to the second floor of this open space in the courtyard, and then it is undercover. And you can tell by this dashed line here.
Hi. Since this is sort of even though it's separately owned, somewhat of an integrated project from what I can see, the park seems to go, or the green space goes under the wall of the old school into the green space that was in the center. Is that going to be public space? And my other question is, since we're talking about amenities and integration here, there had been talk of a cafe, and I don't know if that's still happening. I think it would be really great, and whether there'd be outdoor seating that would be either in your part or onto the city.
Property-wise, there is a property line here, and this side is the private property, and this side is a public property. So, but there is no fence or wall between them. So basically, people are going to be able to walk through here, get to this plaza, which is covered, and here is a restaurant, which we are starting to talk to different brokers to start getting interested potential restaurants. And then this is the courtyard, which also it's open, but there is kind of like a bottleneck right there, just to have a sense of more privacy, because the residential units are here. So, but still, it's all open.
Talk about restaurant. Would this be more of an informal restaurant, not a high-end, tablecloth restaurant, and maybe having coffee and all that?
So the intention is not to have a high-end restaurant, but again, we're starting the process. We're talking right now with 3 different brokers and starting to learn more about the market.
Hi, I haven't been to prior meetings, so forgive me if this has already been addressed, but are dogs allowed in here? And if so, will there be bags and stations so that people can pick up waste?
So when we design an off-leash recreation area, or an ORLA, then we provide the baggie stations. Usually people bring bags, or in this case, this is not a dog park, so we will not provide that. Now we will need to make a decision, and again, this is, I'm not quite sure how this is going to be made about whether or not dogs are allowed on a leash. So that's a whole other conversation, but they will not be allowed off-leash. It's not an off-leash recreational area.
I also was late, so forgive me. In the question of trying to deter bicycles going right through, did you discuss, or has anybody discussed some kind of speed bumps in the path? Along with other punishments?
So we're not really trying to punish anyone. I know. It's a multimodal path. We are hopeful that people will say, wow, there's a lot of people and children and things, and I'm going to get off my bike and walk it. But I think that people tend to kind of fix themselves when they see, or most responsible people, like everyone, there's 99%, and then there's the 1%. But the idea is that you can get through there. That was an expressed desire that bicyclists wanted, and so we want to be able to do that, but we are hoping that it's going to be very harmonious and not, if it does become an issue, then we could consider other kind of things, but let's start off with kumbaya and then go to punishment.
So I'm interested in kids being able to climb on things. And I was wondering if there's any way that the wall itself can have climbing on it, either just climbing holds or little platforms you can climb from one to the other, or something else so that we can take care of that vertical space, especially for small people, that they can run around in.
So while that seems like a great idea, it triggers a number of different safety design elements that would need to be done, and that can be quite expensive, like the safety surfacing that you see under playgrounds. So it would be something that we would have had to start to explore much earlier on. I mean, having a vertical wall then necessitates that you have to have, or a climbing wall for a child necessitates that you have a lot of other safety features.
They don't, at Morse Kelly, I think it's just cement underneath it, and they put stuff on the wall there.
But the one at Morse Kelly, I believe, is like 3 feet. It's like you can't really get up. So, I mean, I think we could look at whether we could put a couple of handholds, but I think in the Morse Kelly one, it was part of what they were thinking, and they're very, very low. So there's not really a possibility that you could get hurt, and there should be safety surfacing underneath it.
I don't think so. I think it's just cement under it, and they get it close enough, but.
Okay, we can definitely look into that. I'm going to go this way just because I'm closer.
You mentioned as part of the design incorporating concrete from the original school itself. What part of the school did those big slabs of the concrete come from?
Very good question. And those are the ones that we got from the demolition. There are spandrel beams. So for example, this is a spandrel beam. So the finish is beautiful. It almost looks like a stone just because of the aging. So the pore open and you can see the aggregate, and that's the surface that is going to be you're going to be sitting on and you're going to be touching. And the nice thing also is that they are 4 feet and 6 feet even, right? So they're pretty wide. So usually for a bench you need 2 feet, something like this. But these ones are double, so almost you can lay back on the benches. We have how many of those we have?
Plus the amphitheater.
Plus the amphitheater, yeah. So I would say that there are like 20, something like that. So we have like 20 spandrel beams placed just throughout the park.
I don't have a specific name in mind, but since the subject of trying to widen the possibility of who you name this after beyond white male veterans. I'm going to suggest, are there any scientists, artists, writers, musicians, performers who are associated with this neighborhood? And if there are, pick one of them.
Hi, I heard someone reference the, I think the lot right next to the basketball court, and I was just curious, yeah, on that side and on the other side, is that parking lot? Is that going to stay parking lot?
It's Tom's parking lot, so it'll stay as that. We don't know if development plans in play, but we'll assume not.
On the naming issue, I think it might be interesting to have a contest for the neighborhood, and maybe the whole citywide, to come up with names for the park, and maybe a little city community committee to decide the name, and maybe some of the issues that we're talking about coming up with sort of a different name than history has brought about might be accomplished. And I think there's a lot of buy-in when people participate in something like this.
So Sue passed that responsibility off to me, so I am happy to get a naming contest going. I'll just have to, figure out which is the best mode of communication, which it'll probably be lots of modes. It'll probably be on Facebook, it'll be through emails, and I will also talk to the city communication director so we can see what we can come up with, and also check the process that's been used, and then see whether we can maybe recreate that process a little bit in terms of who's picked for it, based on maybe whatever the parameters are. But I'm happy to take that charge and set up a naming contest.
I do have an answer to the Eddie Martin question. Just so you know, talk to my daughter. Eddie Martin was a young man who grew up on Electric Avenue, and he was working at he went to the Powderhouse School in Somerville High, and he was working at a Foot Locker at Meadow Glen Mall, and he was killed in a car accident on the way home. And he always used to play stickball in that playground, and that was very popular among everybody in the neighborhood to play stickball in that park and against the wall. So my daughter said there may be something that says Easy Ed there. I guess that's what they referred to him. So that's the story behind it. I'm not saying to name him after him, but just so you know who Eddie Martin is.
One use case probably that's worth considering in terms of like where you might want to have safety surfacing, if any, is the daycare within the Tufts Administration Building. When the kids get out there, right now there's not really a good place for them to go play. Like Tufts has basically said, don't go play in our courtyard, which is where they would keep trying to play, except when Tufts kicks them out. So I suspect that the kids getting out from preschool, like the preschoolers, will go and end up playing in that park a bunch after dismissal.
There is also a playground about a block away from the Tufts building.
Yeah, and I think it's just distance-wise, it's such a proximity that the walk 2 blocks down with a 3-year-old is a very different story than being right there.
You couldn't have asked this question when you
Just a response. I have a lot of young grandchildren, and we use the parks. And I was also chairman of the Recreation Commission for a period of time. And one of the most underserved populations in the city is the 14 to 18 age group. So the initial discussion around this park, since we have the Hotchkins nearby on one side and we have the North Street playground, and if you haven't done it yet with children, that climbing structure, my grandchildren love at the North Street playground. It's well worth it, if they are into climbing. And it's got the soft pad and everything. So the intent in the discussion I participated in was to keep this more for the older people, including adults and the seniors that are going to live in this building, and not really for the little kids. They can go to the Hotchkins, the North Street, and I also take mine over here on Powderhouse Boulevard too.
So really, I think you hit on one thing, that is that within our network of parks, we really try to have a very different variety. And because we are so densely populated, it's usually not very far to find a playground or a basketball court or a quiet place to be. The other thing, if you do have children, the recreation department in Somerville offers fantastic programming that's very affordable, and they do a really good job.
So I'm Sean Becker. I was on the advisory committee with Jim. I've also had 3 children go through that very daycare, and I go through that park every day, or I used to. And so one of the thoughts we had was that there is very much out there. I'm sort of reiterating what Jim said, but it was very intentional that the older kids, and I know my kids can run around a grass field or climb through prickers bushes or into a dumpster and have just as much fun as having a dedicated play structure. But you know, the thought was to create a greater expanse there.
So, so you just want to wrap it up. Please, everybody sign in. There is a notebook running around, so thank you for that, and I'll make sure to add all those names, update the website, and send an email with conclusions. Also, I want to say that this project, it's a project in collaboration. We have been in contact with Councillor Katiana Valentine, and she has been since day one a very good source of communication and transfer the comments from the community of what they want to be the project, the park, etc. Also, I want to thank Sue from the city, that she has been helping us coordinate everything, not only also with the community, but also through the process of permits, etc. And then Luisa, on the side of the park, we have been having a lot of meetings together with Eden from ground view of thinking what's the best way to do this park, not only as the design and as the construction, but how it can last and how it can be a nice park for the coming years. So, and then lastly, again, thank you very much, everybody, for coming, for your interest on the project and the park. Thanks again.
Is there one more sheet? I signed something.